The science fair was scheduled for a Friday evening in late October, and Emma had been preparing for weeks with Michael's help. Their project on animal adaptation had grown into something far more elaborate than Sarah had expected, involving detailed research, photographs from the animal rescue, and even a small presentation about how injured animals recover and adapt to new circumstances. Sarah arrived at the school gymnasium that evening to find it transformed into a showcase of student projects. Emma practically dragged her through the crowd to their display table, where Michael was already waiting with a proud smile on his face. "Mommy, look, Dr. Mike helped me make these amazing poster boards, and we have real pictures from the animal rescue." Emma's excitement was infectious, and Sarah found herself smiling despite her nervousness about the evening. The project was impressive. Michael and Emma had created a comprehensive display showing how different animals adapt to challenges, with a special focus on rescued animals learning to live with disabilities or injuries. Emma had written thoughtful explanations for each section, and her natural artistic ability was evident in the colorful illustrations that decorated the boards. "This is incredible, Emma," Sarah said, genuinely amazed by the quality of the work. "You should be so proud of yourself." "I couldn't have done it without Dr. Mike," Emma said generously. "He taught me so much about animal biology and helped me understand the scientific method." Sarah caught Michael's eye over Emma's head, and he smiled at her with an expression that was both proud and humble. Over the past month, she had watched him pour time and energy into helping Emma with the project, never missing a scheduled work session and always prepared with new ideas and resources. As the evening progressed and judges moved from table to table, Sarah found herself standing beside Michael, both of them watching Emma confidently explain her project to curious visitors. Emma's knowledge and enthusiasm were obvious to everyone who stopped by their table. "She's going to win something," Michael said quietly to Sarah. "Look how engaged the judges are with her presentation. Win or lose. She's learned so much," Sarah replied. "Thank you for making this such a positive experience for her." Michael turned to look at her directly. "Thank you for letting me be part of it. These past few weeks have been the best of my life." Before Sarah could respond, Emma came rushing over with a ribbon in her hand. "I won second place," she announced, her face glowing with pride. "The judges said my project showed exceptional research and that my presentation was very professional." Both adults immediately congratulated her, and Michael lifted her up in a celebratory hug. Sarah felt her heart skip as she watched them together. Emma's arms wrapped around Michael's neck, both of them laughing with pure joy. The three of them walked to the parking lot together after the fair ended, Emma chattering excitedly about the other projects she had seen and already making plans for next year's science fair. When they reached Sarah's car, Michael hesitated. "Emma," he said, crouching down to her level, "I'm so proud of you tonight. You worked really hard and it showed. Will you help me with next year's project too?" Emma asked hopefully. Michael glanced at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "If your mom says it's okay, I would love to help you with next year's project." Emma threw her arms around Michael's neck again. This was the best science fair ever. As Sarah buckled Emma into her car seat, she could hear her daughter talking to her stuffed elephant about the evening, recounting every detail with the excitement of a child who felt truly accomplished and supported. "Sarah," Michael said as she closed Emma's door, "could I talk to you for a minute?" They walked a few steps away from the car, and Sarah found herself suddenly nervous about what he might say. "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I want you to know that I'm grateful for every moment you've allowed me to spend with Emma," Michael began, "but I need to be honest with you about something." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I'm not just grateful to know Emma," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm grateful to have you back in my life too. These past few weeks watching you with Emma, seeing the amazing mother you've become, the strong, independent woman you are. Sarah, I never stopped loving you." Sarah felt her breath catch. This was the conversation she had been both hoping for and dreading. "Michael, I know I don't deserve another chance with you," he continued. "I know I hurt you terribly, and I know you've built a good life without me. But I had to tell you how I feel, not just as Emma's father, but as someone who realizes he made the biggest mistake of his life 9 years ago." Sarah looked at him standing there in the parking lot, vulnerable and honest, and felt all her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of letting you back into my heart and having you leave again." "I understand that fear," Michael said. All I can tell you is that I'm not the same person I was 9 years ago. I know what I lost when I walked away from you, and I would never make that mistake again." Emma's voice called out from the car. "Mommy, can Dr. Mike come have ice cream with us to celebrate?" Both adults looked toward the car, where Emma was pressing her face against the window with hopeful eyes. Sarah felt herself smiling despite the emotional intensity of the conversation. "What do you say?" Michael asked softly. "Ice cream sounds pretty good after such a big night." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man she had fallen in love with in college, but older and wiser and humbled by years of regret. She saw Emma's father, who had spent the last month proving his commitment to being present in their daughter's life. And she saw someone who might be worth the risk of trusting again. "Ice cream sounds perfect," she said, as they walked toward the ice cream shop with Emma skipping between them, chattering about her successful project and already making plans for their next adventure together. Sarah realized that sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. The family she had never dared to hope for was walking beside her, imperfect and complicated, but real and full of possibility. Emma reached up and took both of their hands, swinging between them as they walked. "This is the best night ever," she declared, and looking at her daughter's happy face and feeling Michael's warm hand in hers, Sarah had to agree. For the first time in 9 years, their little family felt complete. 3 weeks later, Sarah was washing dishes in her kitchen when Emma bounded through the front door after school, her backpack sliding off her shoulder in her excitement. "Mommy, guess what happened at school today?" Emma's face was glowing with enthusiasm as she dropped her backpack by the door and rushed to the kitchen. "What happened, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, drying her hands on a towel and giving Emma her full attention. "Mrs. Peterson said we're having a science fair next month and we get to pick any project we want. I want to do something about animals since I want to be a veterinarian." Emma was practically bouncing on her toes. "Can we call Dr. Mike and ask him for ideas? He said he knows lots about science stuff." Sarah felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that happened whenever Emma mentioned Michael. Over the past 3 weeks, he had been carefully and respectfully building a relationship with Emma. They had started with a casual lunch at a child-friendly restaurant, where Michael had been nervous and wonderful, asking Emma about her interests and telling her funny stories about being a doctor. "That's a great idea," Sarah said. "Dr. Mike would probably love to help you brainstorm some science fair ideas." Michael had been incredibly patient and thoughtful throughout the process. He never pushed for more time than Sarah was comfortable with, and he always checked with her before making any suggestions or plans involving Emma. He had quickly figured out that the way to Emma's heart was through her love of learning and animals. The previous weekend, he had taken them both to the zoo where Emma had peppered him with endless questions about the animals they saw. Sarah had watched from a respectful distance as Michael patiently explained everything he could about animal biology and behavior. Emma had been absolutely captivated, and Sarah had to admit that seeing the two of them together felt natural in a way that surprised her. "Can we call him now?" Emma asked hopefully. Sarah glanced at the clock. It was almost 5, which meant Michael would be finishing his shift at the hospital soon. They had exchanged phone numbers that first week, and he had told her she could call or text any time if Emma wanted to talk or if she had questions about anything. "Sure, we can call him," Sarah agreed. "But remember, he might be busy at the hospital." Emma nodded seriously and waited while Sarah dialed Michael's number. He answered on the second ring, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he recognized her number. "Hi, Sarah. How are you both doing?" "We're good. Emma has some exciting news about a school project, and she was hoping you might have some ideas to help her." "I would love to help with a school project," Michael said immediately. "Can I talk to her?" Sarah handed the phone to Emma, who immediately launched into an animated explanation of the science fair. Sarah could hear Michael's responses through the phone, his voice patient and encouraging as Emma described her ideas. "Oh, that's a great idea," Emma said, her eyes lighting up. "I never thought about that. Yes, I would love to learn about that. Can we really do that?" The conversation continued for several minutes, with Emma growing more excited by the moment. When she finally handed the phone back to Sarah, she was practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "He has the most amazing ideas, Mommy. He said we could study how different animals adapt to their environments. And maybe we could even visit his friend who works at the animal rescue to see how they help injured animals get better." Sarah took the phone back. "She seems pretty excited," she said to Michael. "She's incredible, Sarah. Her questions are so thoughtful and her enthusiasm is contagious. If it's okay with you, I'd be happy to help her with the project. We could work on it together over the next few weeks. Sarah found herself agreeing before she had really thought it through. The joy on Emma's face was impossible to deny, and Michael had proven over the past few weeks that he was genuinely committed to being a positive presence in Emma's life. That would be wonderful, she said. Emma would love that. After they hung up, Emma spent the rest of the evening researching animals and science fair ideas on Sarah's laptop. She made lists of questions she wanted to ask Michael and drew pictures of different project ideas. Sarah had rarely seen her daughter so motivated about a school assignment. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah found herself thinking about how much their lives had changed in just a few weeks. The adjustment hadn't been as difficult as she had feared. Michael had been respectful of their boundaries and routines, and Emma had adapted to having him in their lives with the remarkable flexibility that children possess. But Sarah still felt uncertain about her own feelings. Watching Michael with Emma brought back memories of why she had fallen in love with him in college. He was kind, intelligent, and had a gentle way of explaining things that made even complex topics seem accessible. Emma clearly adored him, and he seemed genuinely delighted by every moment he spent with her. The problem was that Sarah could feel herself softening toward him, and that scared her. She had built a good life as a single mother. She and Emma had routines and traditions that worked for them. She had learned to be completely self-sufficient, and she wasn't sure she was ready to trust someone else with her heart again. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "Thank you for letting me help with Emma's project. I know this is all new and probably complicated for you. I want you to know that I don't have any expectations beyond being able to know Emma. Whatever you're comfortable with is what we'll do." Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. "She's really happy about working on the project with you. Thank you for being so patient with both of us." His response came quickly. "Being part of Emma's life, even in this small way, is the greatest gift I could ask for. Thank you for giving me this chance." Sarah set her phone aside and walked to Emma's bedroom doorway. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, her favorite book still open beside her pillow. Emma's face looked so much like Michael's when she slept, with the same peaceful expression and the same way of curling up on her side. For 8 years, Sarah had made every decision about Emma's life alone. She had been both mother and father, protector and provider, teacher and friend. It had been exhausting at times, but it had also been empowering to know that she could handle anything that came their way. Now, for the first time, she wasn't alone in caring about Emma's well-being. Michael's interest in their daughter was clearly genuine, and his desire to be involved seemed to come from a place of love, rather than obligation. Emma was thriving under the attention of a father figure, and Sarah had to admit that their little family felt more complete with him in it. But the question that kept Sarah awake that night was whether she was ready to let Michael be part of not just Emma's life, but their life together, and whether she was brave enough to find out what that might look like. Emma woke up the next morning feeling much better. Her fever had broken during the night and her breathing was significantly improved. She was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book that one of the nurses had brought her when Michael stopped by during his rounds. "Good morning, Emma," he said gently, approaching her bed with a smile. "You look like you're feeling much better today." Emma looked up at him with curious eyes. "I am better. Mommy says I can probably go home today." "That's wonderful news," Michael said, checking her chart. "Do you mind if I listen to your chest one more time?" Emma shook her head and set down her crayon. As Michael listened to her breathing with his stethoscope, she studied his face intently. "You have green eyes like me," she observed matter-of-factly. Michael's hand stilled on the stethoscope, and he glanced quickly at Sarah, who had gone very pale. "I do," he said carefully. "Green eyes are pretty special, aren't they?" "Mommy says I got them from my daddy," Emma continued innocently. "But I've never met him. He lives far away." The silence in the room was deafening. Michael slowly removed his stethoscope and sat down on the edge of Emma's bed. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. "Emma, honey," Sarah said quickly, "why don't you finish your coloring while Dr. Reynolds finishes checking you?" But Emma was clearly curious about this kind doctor, who had been taking such good care of her. "Do you have any kids?" she asked Michael directly. Michael's throat worked as he swallowed hard. No, I don't, he said quietly. But I think kids are pretty amazing. I want to be a doctor like you when I grow up, Emma announced. Well, a doctor for animals, but still a doctor. That's a wonderful goal, Michael said, and Sarah could hear the emotion in his voice. Being a veterinarian is very important work. Animals need doctors who care about them. Emma beamed at his encouragement. Mommy says I'm smart enough to do anything I want when I grow up. Your mommy is absolutely right, Michael said, glancing at Sarah with something that looked like gratitude. And I can tell you're very smart just from talking to you. Dr. Wong appeared in the doorway with discharge papers. Good news, Emma. Your chest x-ray this morning shows significant improvement. You get to go home today. Emma clapped her hands together excitedly. Yay! I missed my bed and my stuffed animals. As Dr. Wong went through the discharge instructions with Sarah, Michael quietly excused himself. But Sarah could see him through the doorway, standing in the hallway looking troubled. When Dr. Wong left, Sarah knew she couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. Emma, sweetie, I need to step into the hallway for just a minute to talk to the doctor about your medicine. Can you get your elephant ready to go home? Emma nodded happily and began gathering her things. Sarah stepped into the hallway where Michael was waiting. She's incredible, he said immediately. She's so bright and sweet, and the way she talks about you, it's clear how much she loves you. Michael, I know what you're thinking, but is there any doubt? He interrupted. Because looking at her, talking to her, I don't have any doubt at all. She has my eyes, my curiosity, even the way she tilts her head when she's thinking about something. Sarah felt tears threatening. It doesn't matter. It can't matter. She's 8 years old. She has a life, a routine, friends at school. I can't just turn her world upside down because you suddenly want to be involved. I'm not asking you to turn her world upside down, Michael said urgently. I just want to know the truth. And maybe, if it's what you think might be okay for Emma, I'd like the chance to know her. You gave up that chance 9 years ago, Sarah said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held the day before. I know I did, and I know I don't deserve a second chance. But Sarah, if she's my daughter, doesn't she deserve the chance to know her father? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow because it was the same question she had been asking herself for years. On Emma's birthdays, on Father's Day, during school events when other children talked about their dads. Sarah had wondered if she was being fair to Emma by keeping the truth from her. How do I know you won't leave again? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do I know that when this gets complicated or hard, you won't disappear again? Michael was quiet for a long moment. You don't know. I can't prove that to you with words. But Sarah, I'm not the same person I was 9 years ago. I've grown up. I've spent years wondering about that pregnancy. Wondering if you had the baby, wondering if somewhere out there I had a child. You could have found out, Sarah pointed out. If you really wanted to know, you could have contacted me. I tried a few times over the years, Michael admitted. But I was afraid. I was afraid you'd tell me to stay away, and I was afraid you'd tell me I had a child that I'd already failed. It was easier to wonder than to know for certain that I had messed up something that important. Sarah looked through the doorway at Emma, who was now dressed in her regular clothes and chatting animatedly with a nurse about her stuffed elephant. Her daughter was resilient and adaptable, but she was also sensitive. Whatever decision Sarah made would affect Emma for the rest of her life. If I tell you the truth, Sarah said slowly, what happens next? I won't have you confusing her or making promises you can't keep. I don't know what happens next, Michael said honestly. I'd like to think we could figure it out together for Emma's sake. Maybe we could start slowly. Let her get to know me as a friend first. She already likes you, Sarah observed. She told me this morning that you were the nicest doctor she'd ever met. A smile broke across Michael's face. She did? Yes, and she asked if she could write you a thank you card for taking such good care of her. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I would treasure that card. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about all the times Emma had wondered about her father, all the questions she had asked that Sarah had deflected. She thought about Emma's natural curiosity and intelligence and how she deserved honest answers about her life. Yes, she said quietly. Yes, Emma is your daughter. Michael closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall. When he opened them again, tears were streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for telling me. This doesn't change anything overnight, Sarah said quickly. We take this slowly and Emma's well-being comes first. If at any point I think this is hurting her, it stops. Of course, Michael agreed immediately. Whatever you think is best for her. I just want the chance to know my daughter. Emma appeared in the doorway, dragging her small bag behind her. I'm ready to go home, Mommy. Sarah and Michael quickly wiped their eyes and composed themselves. As they walked toward the elevator together, Emma chattering happily about feeling better, Sarah wondered if she had just made the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. But looking at the genuine joy on Michael's face as he listened to Emma talk, she thought maybe, just maybe, her daughter was about to gain something wonderful. Emma was moved to a pediatric room on the 3rd floor, and Sarah felt some relief when a different doctor introduced herself as the attending pediatrician who would be overseeing Emma's care. Dr. Patricia Wong was a warm, middle-aged woman who immediately put both Sarah and Emma at ease with her gentle manner and clear explanations. Dr. Reynolds' diagnosis was correct, Dr. Wong explained as she reviewed Emma's chart. It's bacterial pneumonia, which responds well to antibiotics. We've started her on an IV medication, and she should begin feeling better within 24 to 48 hours. Sarah settled into the reclining chair next to Emma's bed, finally allowing herself to relax slightly. Emma was sleeping peacefully, her breathing already seeming less labored with the oxygen support and medication. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of medical equipment and the distant sounds of hospital activity in the hallway, but Sarah's mind wouldn't stop racing. Seeing Michael again had brought back a flood of memories she had spent years trying to suppress. Their relationship in college had been intense and passionate, the kind of love that felt like it could conquer anything. They had talked about their future together, about marriage and children and the life they would build. Then came the night she told him she was pregnant. She had been nervous but excited, imagining his reaction, planning how they would adjust their dreams to include their baby. Instead, Michael had gone completely silent. He had stood up from their couch and paced around their tiny apartment for what felt like hours. I'm not ready for this, Sarah, he had finally said. I'm starting medical school in the fall. I can't handle a baby right now. Sarah had tried to reason with him to explain that they could make it work somehow. Her parents would help. She could take time off from school. They could figure it out together. But Michael had already made up his mind. I think we need to consider all our options, he had said carefully, and Sarah knew exactly what he meant. The conversation that followed was painful and ugly, with both of them saying things they couldn't take back. Michael had accused her of trying to trap him, of ruining his carefully planned future. Sarah had accused him of being selfish and afraid of commitment. Within a week, he was gone. He transferred to a medical school across the country and left Sarah to face her pregnancy alone. She had tried to contact him a few times in those first months, but he never returned her calls. Eventually, she stopped trying. Now 8 years later, Emma was the center of Sarah's world. She was smart and funny with a laugh that could brighten Sarah's darkest days. She was curious about everything, loved to read, and had inherited Sarah's artistic talent. Emma had asked about her father occasionally when she was younger, but Sarah had given vague answers about him being far away and not part of their lives. A soft knock on the door interrupted Sarah's thoughts. She looked up to see Michael standing in the doorway, still in his white coat but looking uncertain about whether he should enter. I brought some juice boxes, he said, holding up a small bag. The nurses said she might be thirsty when she wakes up. Sarah wanted to tell him to leave, but the gesture was so thoughtful that she found herself nodding instead. Michael entered quietly and set the bag on the bedside table. He stood looking down at Emma for a long moment. She's beautiful, he whispered. Yes, she is, Sarah replied, her voice guarded. Michael pulled up a second chair and sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. Sarah, I need to know, please. Sarah looked at him for the first time since they had been alone. He looked genuinely anguished, his green eyes pleading with her. She thought about all the nights she had wished he was there, all the times Emma had needed a father figure, all the school events where she had been the only single parent in a room full of couples. Why does it matter now? She asked. You made it very clear 9 years ago that you didn't want any part of this. I was 22 years old and terrified, Michael said. I was starting medical school. My parents had just gotten divorced and I felt like my whole world was falling apart. I know that's not an excuse, but I was young and stupid and I panicked. Sarah felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. I was 22 too, Michael. I was scared too. But I didn't run away. You're right, Michael said quietly. You're absolutely right. I was a coward. I've regretted it every day since. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both watching Emma sleep. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the hospital room window, casting a warm glow over her small form. Tell me about her, Michael said suddenly. What's she like? Despite herself, Sarah felt a small smile tug at her lips. She's amazing. She's in 3rd grade and she loves to read. She's already reading books meant for 5th graders. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up because she loves animals. Michael smiled too. That's wonderful. Is she good at school? Straight A's, but she's modest about it. She's also really artistic. She draws these incredible pictures that I frame and put all over our apartment. Sarah found herself warming to the topic despite her reservations. She's funny too. She makes up these elaborate stories about her stuffed animals and puts on little shows for me. She sounds perfect, Michael said, and there was genuine wistfulness in his voice. Emma stirred in her sleep and mumbled something incoherent. Both adults immediately focused on her, watching for signs that she was waking up. But she settled back into peaceful sleep. Michael, Sarah said carefully, even if what you're thinking is true, it doesn't change anything. Emma and I have built a good life together. We don't need anything from you. Michael looked like she had struck him. I'm not asking for anything from you. I need to know if I have a daughter, if I've missed 8 years of my child's life. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt her resolve wavering slightly. She had always told herself that keeping Emma's paternity a secret was protecting them both. Emma didn't need the confusion of a father who might disappear again, and Sarah didn't need the heartbreak of letting Michael back into their lives. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine emotion on his face as he watched Emma sleep, she wondered if she had been protecting them or simply protecting herself from having to face him again. She's never asked about you specifically, Sarah said quietly, but she has asked why she doesn't have a daddy like other kids. Michael's face crumpled slightly. What did you tell her? That some families look different and ours is just me and her, and that's perfectly fine. Sarah's voice was defensive. And it is fine. We're happy. I can see that, Michael said. You've done an incredible job with her. Sarah, I can tell just from watching her for a few minutes that she's loved and well cared for. The genuine admiration in his voice surprised Sarah. She had expected him to be judgmental, or to try to insert himself into their lives immediately. Instead, he seemed to understand the delicate nature of the situation. Emma's breathing had become noticeably easier since the medications started working, and her fever was beginning to break. Sarah felt enormous relief watching her daughter's condition improve, but she also knew that their time in this strange bubble of hospital quiet was limited. Soon, real decisions would need to be made about what came next. The world seemed to stop moving when Dr. Michael Reynolds stepped through the curtain. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs as if someone had punched her in the stomach. She gripped the metal rail of Emma's bed so tightly her knuckles turned white. 9 years. It had been 9 years since she had seen those familiar green eyes. That slightly crooked smile and the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was thinking. Michael looked older now, with a few lines around his eyes and some gray threading through his dark brown hair. But he was unmistakably the same man who had walked out of her life when she needed him most. Sarah, Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. His medical chart slipped from his hands and scattered across the floor. He stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through surprise, shock, and something that looked like pain. Emma stirred on the bed between them, her small cough breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. The sound snapped both adults back to reality. Sarah forced herself to speak, though her voice came out hoarse and strained. She's been sick for 3 days. High fever, trouble breathing. She couldn't look directly at Michael. Instead, she focused on Emma's flushed face, on the rise and fall of her small chest. Michael cleared his throat and moved closer to the bed, his professional training taking over, despite the personal turmoil written across his features. I'm going to examine her now, he said, his voice steadier than Sarah felt. As Michael began his examination, Sarah watched his hands move gently over Emma's small form. Those same hands that had once held her, that had traced patterns on her skin during lazy Sunday mornings. Now they were checking Emma's lymph nodes, listening to her breathing, looking in her throat with a small flashlight. Her breathing is definitely labored, Michael murmured. more to himself than to Sarah. And her throat is quite inflamed. He made notes on a new chart. His handwriting still the same messy scrawl she remembered from grocery lists and love notes. Emma opened her eyes and looked up at the strange man examining her. "Mommy?" She whispered through the oxygen mask, her voice weak and confused. "I'm right here, baby," Sarah said, moving closer to take Emma's hand. "This is the doctor. He's going to help you feel better." Michael's breath caught audibly when Emma spoke. He stared down at her with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read, but she saw his hand tremble slightly as he reached for his stethoscope. "Hello there, Emma," Michael said softly, his voice gentle in the way Sarah remembered he always was with children. "I know you don't feel very good right now. I'm going to listen to your chest, okay? It might be a little cold." Emma nodded weakly and allowed Michael to place the stethoscope on her chest. Sarah watched as he moved it to different positions, his brow furrowed in concentration. She found herself studying his profile, the way his jaw tightened when he was worried about something. "Her lung sounds are concerning," Michael said quietly to Sarah. "I want to order a chest x-ray and some blood work. It looks like pneumonia, but I want to be certain before we start treatment." Sarah nodded, trying to process the medical information while her mind reeled from the impossibility of this situation. Of all the hospitals in the city, of all the doctors on duty, how was it possible that Michael was the one standing here? "How long will the tests take?" she managed to ask. "The x-ray can be done immediately. Blood work will take about an hour for results." Michael was writing orders on his chart, but Sarah could see him glancing at Emma repeatedly. There was something in his expression that went beyond professional concern. A nurse appeared to take Emma for her x-ray. Sarah helped transfer her daughter to a wheelchair, tucking the elephant toy beside her. "I'll be right here when you get back," she promised, kissing Emma's forehead. When they were alone, the silence between Sarah and Michael felt suffocating. He stood on the opposite side of the bed as if the empty space where Emma had been lying was a barrier between them. "Sarah, Michael started, then stopped. He rubbed his face with both hands. "I can't believe you're here. That she's here." "Don't," Sarah said sharply, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. "Don't you dare make this about us. My daughter is sick. That's all that matters right now." Michael flinched as if she had slapped him. "You're right, of course. Emma is my priority. The patient is my priority." But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed him. Sarah could see questions there. Calculations. The same intelligence that had attracted her to him in college. "How old is she?" Michael asked quietly. Sarah's stomach dropped. She had hoped they could get through this without that question, without the conversation she wasn't prepared to have. 8, she said simply. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could practically see him doing the math, counting backward from Emma's age to when they had been together. His face went very pale. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. "Is she—" "Stop," Sarah interrupted. "Just stop. Focus on her medical condition. That's why we're here." But Michael wasn't backing down. "She has my eyes. And the way she holds her hand when she's scared, that's exactly what I used to do as a kid." His voice was growing stronger, more urgent. "Sarah, please. Is Emma my daughter?" The question hung in the air between them like a live wire. Sarah felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had spent 8 years preparing for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for it happening like this, in a hospital room, with Emma sick and vulnerable. "What difference does it make now?" she whispered. "You made your choice 9 years ago." Before Michael could respond, the nurse returned with Emma in the wheelchair. The little girl looked exhausted from the short trip, and Sarah immediately focused on getting her settled back in bed. Michael cleared his throat and stepped back into his professional role. "The X-ray confirms pneumonia in her left lung," he said. "I'm going to start her on antibiotics and breathing treatments. She'll need to stay overnight for observation." Sarah nodded, grateful to have concrete medical information to focus on, but she could feel Michael watching them both, and she knew this conversation was far from over. Sarah Mitchell wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans as she paced around her small apartment kitchen. The sound of her 8-year-old daughter Emma's labored breathing from the living room made her stomach twist with worry. What had started as a simple cough 3 days ago had turned into something much worse. Emma's fever had spiked to 104 degrees that morning, and now she was struggling to catch her breath. "Mommy, it hurts," Emma whispered from the couch. Her small hand pressed against her chest. Her usually bright brown eyes were dull with fever, and her cheeks burned red with heat. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side and felt her forehead again. The fever hadn't broken despite the medication she'd been giving her every 4 hours. Emma's breathing was getting more shallow and rapid. This wasn't just a regular cold anymore. "We're going to the hospital, sweetheart," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm even though panic was rising in her chest. She had always been the type of mother who worried about everything, but this felt different. This felt serious. She quickly gathered Emma's favorite stuffed elephant and a small bag with her insurance cards and phone charger. Emma was too weak to walk on her own, so Sarah carefully lifted her daughter into her arms. The little girl felt like a furnace against her chest, and her breathing was making a slight whistling sound that terrified Sarah. The drive to Mercy General Hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of Sarah's life. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Emma, who was dozing fitfully in her car seat. Every red light felt like torture, and she found herself running through worst-case scenarios in her mind. What if it was pneumonia? What if Emma couldn't breathe properly? What if something happened to her baby? Sarah had been a single mother since Emma was 2 years old. It had never been easy, but she had managed to build a good life for them both. She worked as a graphic designer from home, which allowed her to be present for Emma while still earning enough to support them. They had their routines, their inside jokes, and their weekend adventures to the park or the library. But moments like this reminded her how alone they really were. There was no partner to call for support, no one to share the burden of worry with. It was just her and Emma against the world, and right now Emma needed her to be strong. The emergency room at Mercy General was busier than Sarah had expected for a Tuesday afternoon. She approached the reception desk with Emma still in her arms, the little girl's head resting heavily on her shoulder. "Please, my daughter has a high fever and she's having trouble breathing," Sarah said to the nurse behind the desk. Her voice cracked slightly with worry. The triage nurse, a kind woman with graying hair, immediately stood up when she saw Emma's condition. "How long has she been like this?" she asked, already reaching for a wheelchair. "The fever started this morning, but she's been sick for 3 days. Her breathing just got worse in the last hour," Sarah explained as she gently placed Emma in the wheelchair. The little girl's eyes fluttered open and she reached out for her mother's hand. After a quick assessment, they were fast-tracked into the emergency department. Sarah was grateful that they didn't have to wait in the crowded waiting room. Emma was placed on a hospital bed in a small curtained area, and nurses immediately began taking her vital signs and hooking up monitoring equipment. "The doctor will be in to see you shortly," one of the nurses assured Sarah as she placed an oxygen mask over Emma's face. The little girl looked so small and fragile, surrounded by all the medical equipment. Sarah sat in the plastic chair beside the bed and held Emma's hand. She whispered soothing words to her daughter and stroked her hair, trying to project calm even though her heart was racing. The monitors beeping around them reminded her of how serious this situation had become. She thought about calling her mother, who lived 3 hours away but decided to wait until she knew more about Emma's condition. There was no point in worrying her family until she had concrete information from the doctor. As they waited, Sarah found herself studying Emma's face and remembering when she was born. She had been such a perfect baby, with a full head of dark hair and those beautiful brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Emma had always been healthy and active, which made this illness even more frightening. "Mrs. Mitchell?" a voice called from outside their curtained area. "I'm here to see Emma." Sarah stood up and turned toward the voice, preparing to meet the doctor who would hopefully have answers about her daughter's condition. She took a deep breath, ready to advocate for Emma and ask all the questions that had been swirling in her mind during their wait. The curtain began to pull back, and Sarah felt a mix of hope and anxiety. She needed this doctor to help Emma feel better. She needed them to have a plan to bring her daughter's fever down and help her breathe easier. Most of all, she needed reassurance that her little girl was going to be okay. Emma stirred slightly on the bed and mumbled something incoherent through the oxygen mask. Sarah squeezed her hand gently and whispered, "The doctor's here, baby. Everything's going to be fine." But even as she said the words, she wondered if she was trying to convince Emma or herself.